What's going on YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Power Rangers Hyperforce episode 23. Yes, 23 episodes into Power Rangers Hyperforce, and I will tell you this much right now, this episode was such a crazy episode. I wouldn't say it's necessarily one of the best episodes, but it definitely was up there for being one of the most insane episodes. So many things happened. New Zords, new character forms, also reveals of identities. Yeah, a whole bunch of different things were hinted at and also revealed in all sorts of different ways. And it was just a really emotional episode. You know, there was emotions that were high peaks of, you know, you want to cry. And then there were parts where you just couldn't stop laughing this episode. And so it's definitely one of those episodes where you need to watch it. And if you're a Power Rangers fan, if you've seen one season, if you've seen every season, if you're not watching Power Rangers Hyperforce, what are you doing? Please, please, please watch it, because you're missing something that's pretty much one of the best things that the Power Rangers franchise has done pretty much ever. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love so many things that the franchise done. That's why I'm such a big fan of it, and that's why I am devoted to doing so much for the Power Rangers franchise, whether it be going to conventions, whether it be meeting the actors, whether it be making these videos, whether it be just in general buying product, talking about the shows, being involved through social media, you name it. I do all that stuff because I love this franchise, and this is a great example of something that stands out to me as being an amazing thing for the franchise, that if you're a fan, you need to be watching this. We are 2 episodes away from this show being done, unless there is a second season, which nothing has been confirmed so far, but you never know. So keep that in mind, guys. I am very much so happy with the show. I'm sad at the same time, kind of glad to know that there will be a break point. You know, I knew that it was going to come at some point. The fact that we have 2 more weeks of it, it's a sad fact, but at least we can say we've had a really great experience with this show, and that's really what I want to know. I want to feel like I'm enjoying what I'm seeing. So, moving on to the actual episode itself, because that's why we're here. The episode is really an interesting one. It begins with us actually seeing that Vesper is not in the very beginning of the episode, which definitely brought a lot of people into the perspective of she's not showing up, she's probably dead, and there's no chance of her coming back because her chair's not there. Why is that a big deal? Because in most episodes of Power Rangers Hyperforce, when there's a chair missing, like let's just say that 5 of the Rangers are there, and one of the chairs is missing, and I'm talking about like in the cases that, for example, let's just say we have like the 5 core members, not the 5 core members, but like maybe it's everyone, like Joe's included, but say one of the others is missing. Or we have it where 4 of the members are there, but one of the members is missing and there's no chair there. What that basically implies typically is that person's not showing up today. And this episode definitely was one of those situations where they made you think that way, but things definitely worked out in a very different way that many people were not expecting. And believe me, yeah, it's definitely an interesting episode overall. So let's get started with the actual, so let's keep on moving from here. What we do end up seeing is that Jack is actually wearing, by the way, a really awesome Time Force jacket. I love the jacket on him. It looks so good. We also see that it continues directly off of Vesper's death from the previous episode. And what happens is that the Alliance leader says some mysterious words and then reaches his hands up to the sky, and suddenly a dome forms around the area, pouring on energy, and it's this magic force field that traps the Putties, Volcanos, the Alliance leader, the Rangers, the Sentinel Knight, all inside of it. And it's really an interesting thing. And the words that she says is something from the actual franchise. So if you're wondering what that is, I actually have a pretty good guess as to what it probably is from. And I'll tell you that much right now. I'm imagining, they didn't confirm it, but I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers with Rita Repulsa. There's a point in the original series where she ends up like using a certain item to kind of say an evil chant, and I'm guessing that that's where they stole this from. I could be wrong, it could be from another point, but that's the one that I immediately thought of, and most likely I would imagine that is probably what it was that they were ripping that from, which is cool. I like the fact that they do those kind of rips, especially for something that's primarily nonsense, that's made up just for the show, just to have something to create a certain effect. So that's very cool. So anyway, from here, the Alliance leader ends up actually grabbing Vesper's body. And at the same time, Marv has the Corona Aurora. And as we know, Marv wants to bring back Vesper. And at the same time, the Alliance leader uses Vesper's body as sort of a exchange piece. Like a piece that, not an exchange piece, something he can take advantage of. Because, if they... he wants the Corona Aurora, but if Marv wants Vesper's body, he has to give up the Corona Aurora. And this leads to a lot of conflict with Marv and the other Rangers, because Marv is insistent upon keeping the Corona Aurora, and the thing is that he's so insisted upon the fact that, if the Corona Aurora is given to the forces of evil, this could be it. In other words, this could end everything and we'll be in serious trouble for the future, and the universe could be completely destroyed. But Vesper's body is something that we care about as well. So we can't give it up, but at the same time, we don't want to lose our friend, even though she's pretty much dead. So that all does end up happening. There's different conversations between the different Rangers. Eddie and Marv have discussions about not putting it into evil hands. Jack contacts Alpha 55 about breaking the force field. He tries to do it using his Zord. Doesn't really work. He actually gets hurt a bunch. All sorts of different fight sequences occur. Marv even gets hurt trying to use the Corona Aurora to kind of create a beam of energy that actually hurts him. And that's a very interesting thing. Chloe also understands about Marv's feelings, and the Sentinel does also kind of understand. And he's pretty beat up as well. So all this is happening. More putties are eventually summoned, and Eddie eventually stares directly into the Alliance leader's point of view. Again, we don't really see the eyes, but still an interesting thing. He ends up even trying to do something excessive, where Eddie actually summons his Zord and tries to crush 12 putties in one go, which is definitely something that's not very rangerly, and it's brought up in the episode. And even in the Firestar chat, they kind of talk about the fact that it's really not a rangerly thing to be so excessive when it comes to just putties. It's not like he was fighting a boss. I mean, the fact that he was fighting a group of putties, which are, your basic foot soldiers, and had to go out of his way to do that, it's like, that's pushing it, man. So that's very interesting. All this happens. There's points where Joe tries to actually use his Hydra Blades to kind of swoop and get Vesper, but instead the Alliance leader actually stops Joe in his tracks when he's invisible and actually grabs him by the neck, which prevents him from moving and doing anything, and it leads to a very interesting situation. So all that's happening. Chloe eventually decides when things just are getting too tough, and she hears a voice that she has to take action. She shows some leadership. Again, to me, Chloe is not one of my she's a really good character, but as a whole, she's definitely not like my favorite Hyperforce Ranger by any means. But she did something that was really good this episode, which was really showing a sense of leadership and realizing, what is the best tactic that I could take to kind of make sure that the Corona Aurora doesn't get into evil hands and we can work things out. And what she does is that she grabs the Corona Aurora from Marv. She ends up using her Battleizer, which is fine. And what ends up happening is that she throws it in the air. She uses her bow. She launches a whole bunch of arrows into the air. A couple of them miss, and then one of them shoots right through the Corona Aurora, leading to it shattering and falling to pieces. So it's very, very, very important, of course, the fact that the Corona Aurora is destroyed. And when this happens, suddenly the Alliance leader is affected by it, where something internally inside of him begins to react. where he realizes that something has broken in him. Like, you know, he has some link to the Corona Aurora. He doesn't fully understand why it's there, but he immediately realizes after this, he has to go. He can't stay here anymore. Something has happened to him, and he's not the same way anymore, and he's weaker. And the thing is that from here, the Rangers try to do all sorts of attacks against the Alliance leader, and the attacks work pretty well. I mean, they do a group Zord attack, they do a battleized attack, they have attacks with Joe. Eventually, even Marv manages to rescue Vesper and Vesper's body, and Joe, which is very cool. And also, Eddie ends up getting Vesper's body at one point, which is very good. All this does end up happening. The Hyperforce Rangers do end up getting to use their Zords. We do at one point actually see that Marv gets to get Joe's what do you call it, Hydra shield. So the shield that he wears on him, you know, it looks very similar to the dragon shield that Tommy wore in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So basically they kind of mimic that whole concept with the Hydra shield. And in this case, what actually happens in this episode is that Marv at one point gets the Hydra shield, so it becomes like Jason, the Red Ranger from Mighty Morphin, when he gets the Dragon shield. So if you've seen those images, and I'm sure if you watch Power Rangers, you know what I'm talking about. There's also a point where Jason gets it, and in this case, they kind of reference that in this episode where Marv gets to wear the Hydra shield, which is very cool. And on top of that, what we end up seeing this episode is that when the Rangers summon their Zords and everything, it turns out that Alpha 55 also ends up having Joe's Zord finally ready. And Joe's Zord we finally get to see, which is so cool. It is the Hydra Hyper Zord, which is very cool. So it's that double H sound, which is very important because a lot of times they were having issues with actually saying the word Hydra, the words Hydra Hyperzord, because it's a mouthful and it's alliteration, so it's hard to do at times, even though it's not that much alliteration. Still, cool to see it. Looks really awesome. I actually love the design of the Hydra Hyperzord. Probably one of my favorite designs of the Hyperzords. It's very cool. It has 6 heads. It's this nice big dragon. As far as if it would ever be made into like an actual like real life Zord, I mean, obviously anything's possible, but I don't really know how that would work when it comes to like maybe forming a Megazord or forming a combined mode, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like based off of its design, it would be so intricate and so complex that I don't know how practical it would be to ever expect something like that to ever exist. And again, we have no idea about a combined mode for the Hydra Hyperzord and the Chronos Hyperforce Megazord, you know? We have no idea if that's ever going to happen. I would hope so. It could be the case that they do it eventually. We won't know. And at this point, we've only 2 episodes left. I wouldn't expect it to happen now. If they do it, it would be in the 2nd season, if they do it at all. Keep that in mind. Could they do it? Maybe. It's not something I would ever expect, and I wouldn't be upset or annoyed if they said, no, we didn't have the chance to do it, because it's such short notice and they introduced the Green Ranger so late in that it's not like they're doing this 10 episodes in and they decide to do this. They're introducing it very late, and also the money is probably just not there for them to do something like that right now, which I completely understand. You know, if the show gets even more praise later on and things just really show increasingly impressive results in the future, and there's enough stuff going into it where we can really get a 2nd season, who knows? All that stuff could happen and more. I'm just saying, it's a very interesting point. So what does end up happening eventually is that the Rangers continue to fight. They end up having to deal with Volcanos, who ends up turning big. Yes, Volcanos turns big, and the Rangers have to use the Chronos Hydras, or the Chronos Hyperforce Megazord, as well as Joe using the Hydra Hyperzord. So that's very cool. Very interesting to see, of course. We actually get to see those two Zord, the Megazord and the Zord, a fight against Volcanos. We also see water attacks used that actually managed to destroy Volcanos, which is very cool. So Volcanos is pretty much done for. So yes, a character that's been in the show for quite some time is dead. And if you're wondering about my voice, I actually am sick. I'm not that sick. It's just I work in a place where I have to speak a lot. So because of that, it's just because I've used my voice a lot. So I'm not in the best shape here, but I can definitely talk. I'm still trying to do this video because I love this stuff and I need to do it. And I'm just bringing it up now. So anyway, what does end up happening is that eventually the Rangers, after battling after battling everyone and things are done, the Rangers do return to the Hyperforce ship after Alpha 55 comes in contact with them again. They eventually get in there, and what we end up seeing is that what do you call it? They are trying to figure out what they can do with Vesper. Alpha 55 actually decides to connect his body to Vesper, and at the same time the Rangers try to do a whole bunch of other things, trying to recount information about Vespers Memories and doing all sorts of other things. There's serious emotional moments. Marv had some great moments at the beginning, and there was moments where like literally Eddie broke down, and I mean it was really powerful. I mean, it's a really amazing sight, and it's something that if you're a Power Rangers fan, you need to watch that. I don't know if you would consider it like the best acting ever, and it's not necessarily amazing acting, but it's really an emotional moment because you can tell he was really feeling something. Like he was really worried that she was going to be gone and there's no chance he would ever see her again. And it was just such a strong moment. So all this does end up happening. The Rangers are trying to figure out different things. We also end up seeing that Eddie and Jack discuss things about how every single time the Alliance Leader goes to these different timelines, it seems like there's a increase in energy in the morphing grid, and these are extreme increases of energy. And when I say that, I mean like to the nth degree, like to the greatest extent. These energy these morphing grid energy pulses are like super powerful, and it's just an amazing thing to think about how powerful the energy is that comes out of them. I mean, I am still very much so shocked by how well they did some of this stuff, because it was really brilliant. Now, what does end up happening eventually is that the Hyperforce Rangers, we end up seeing that, you know, they're trying to repair Alpha 55 because Alpha actually goes out of commission at one point. Eventually, though, what does end up happening is that Vesper returns to the table. Yes, Vesper is back. So for all those that were freaking out and thinking to themselves, there's no way Vesper is coming back. And believe me, there were some people that were arguing me on social media and all sorts of different forums that there's no way Vesper is coming back. And I was saying to them, like, no, she's definitely coming back. They set it up for this. Now, what I said, though, was that they were going to use the Corona Aurora. I agree. I was wrong about that, and clearly that is the case. But I knew that she was going to come back. It was just a question of how she was going to come back, you know? So, in this case, what actually does end up happening is that Vespers memories and everything are actually put into Alpha 55, and Vesper combines with Alpha 55. So that's a pretty crazy moment. Yes, Alpha 55 and Vesper are one. Yes, that does end up happening. And also the other Alphas are in there as well. So Alpha 5 and Alpha 6 somehow are in there, even though you would think, wait, they're two separate things entirely. How can that be? I don't know, but somehow it exists. So keep that in mind. Vesper is combined with all these different alphas into one alpha, so that's a very interesting experience. Thing is, she lost pretty much most of her memory. The only things that she has are memories from Alpha's perspective of herself, and also of just different events that have happened, about the Rangers, about all sorts of different situations. And also the other thing to keep in mind is that she only knows language, but she doesn't remember any of her own memories. So what they actually end up doing is trying to figure out ways to kind of insert her mind into another body, because currently her regular body may not work, but another body may have to be the option that they go with, and if that is the case, it will be a very interesting thing. They also have to remove her memory chip inside of her brain so that they can insert it into whatever body she goes into if that is the case, because Vesper's current body is seriously damaged. So keep it in mind. So all this is happening. We know all about this new information about Vesper. Yes, she's back. She ends up speaking like Alpha 55 with the eyes, and also we end up hearing Alpha 6 with the yo, 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 dude. Yes, that does end up happening this episode. Definitely an interesting situation. We also see at one point during this episode that it turns out the Alliance Leader has someone that's above him. So we've been thinking this whole entire time the Alliance Leader is at the top of the Alliance. Nope. There's someone above him. We don't know who he is. He has a lab coat. So people were initially thinking, lab coat, what could that mean? We don't really know all the details, but what we do know is that supposedly this character ended up, I believe actually getting destroyed 2 years ago and then was supposedly cloned, I think, and that's the actual Alliance Leader. And because of certain events that happened this time, having to do with the Corona Aurora and having to exist and everything like that, it means that they're working in a new timeline outside of the normal means of the universe, and that the future is really unknown. Like, things from here can be anything. There's no real set future for these Rangers and just in general for the Alliance Leader. So that's all very, very important. So we do know now that there's someone above the Alliance Leader. We also end up seeing that eventually, after the Rangers discuss things, they're trying to figure out different ways to bring back Vesper. They also discuss the fact that they are going to I'm sorry about this. That they're going to also try to figure out a time that they have to go to. Eddie and Jack actually figure out that the time that they have to go to next to deal with the Alliance Leader because of the current state of affairs is they have to go to the time of the United Alliance of Evil's big dinner party that they have during the very beginning of Power Rangers in Space, when Andros goes to the United Alliance of Evil's dinner to intrude upon their meeting and hear about what's going on, what plans they have, and maybe recover Zordon. So that's very, very important. We know that that's where they're going next. It's going to be a very cool situation. The Rangers do end up discussing this. They are all informed of the current situation. There's tons of great humor in this episode as well, if you're wondering. Definitely just a lot of really exciting stuff happens. I also wanted to mention that after they know all this of what's going on, they eventually end up telling Alpha 55 to contact everyone from the past for backup. So everyone that's been an ally of theirs somehow is going to be helping them out. Now, does that mean that it's going to be all Time Force officers? Maybe. Does that mean that maybe we'll get some past Rangers that have showed up in previous episodes? You never know. We don't know all the details right now. What we do know is that it's going to be a very interesting end for the season. People are suspecting that they may get Christopher Kamen Lee. That'd be very cool if they could get him next episode. He played Andros in Power Rangers in Space. I would love that to happen. But fingers crossed, of course. So keep it in mind. Definitely have to wait and see what does end up happening. From here, what we do end up seeing is that the Alliance Leader does go to the dinner party where he actually meets Rita and Zed. They're having dinner at the party, and he actually ends up unveiling his identity, which, based on certain details that are revealed, such as the fact that there's an exposed brain and there's certain coloration details. They don't mention the horn, but pretty much everyone's suspecting now that Thrax is the one that is the Alliance Leader. So yes, we now have pretty much the identity of the Alliance Leader. Is it an absolute? No. Can't assume anything for 100% fact, but at this point I would pretty much just say that yes, the Alliance Leader is definitely Thrax. So you may be wondering, do I think Thrax is a good choice? He's okay. He's definitely not one that I was hoping for. He was definitely one of the ones that I would put lower on the list, just because he wasn't that great of a villain, and he's not that exciting. Like, if it were a Ranger from Power Rangers Time Force, or if it were someone from that time period, that would make more sense. The fact that it's this character, it sort of kind of seems weird, and I don't really know the exact reasoning behind the whole, like, I get it, like, it makes sense, but at the same time, I'm sort of like, why does this need to be the case? You know what I mean? Like, they could have done other characters, but I guess it makes sense because of the fact that they're not having to create something brand new, and it's something that, like, would make sense when you think about it. You know what I mean? So keep it in mind. Again, I really did enjoy this episode. If you're wondering about my voice, again, as I said before, I have been sick. I've used it a lot as of late, and I have a lot of work, and the work that I do, I just use it every day, constantly, and it's probably not helping that I'm talking so much, but please understand, I'm doing this for you guys, and just in general, I love it a lot. It's a really good show. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and if you are not already watching Power Rangers Hyperforce, I insist upon you doing it. 2 more episodes to go till the show is over, and unless there's a second season. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.